Good morning, students. I hope I am audible. If you can't hear my voice, please do let me know. Of course, I hope you will let me know. But if you can't hear my voice, how will you even know that I am requesting you to let me know? Anyway, that apart. So, of course, first the announcements. CS Executive Coaching new batch. You can enroll for the new batch for the upcoming exams of CS Executive. For the details, please do visit excelacademy.com, EKCELACADEMY.com, the link for which will be there in the description below. And of course, you can still register there even if you do not wish to get the updates, because about this executive course, there are so much of the notes available, quizzes available on the website that you can make use of it, and you don't have to pay anything extra for all those facilities which are provided free of cost by the academy. That is something which you can make use of. Then, if at all you are taking up CS and you do not know too much about it, or you do not know anything about it, maybe you have questions but you do not know whom to ask and what to ask. So if that is the case, please do get in touch with us. The number is there on the screen. So we'll book a counseling session. Someone from our team will get in touch with you, and you don't have to pay for this either. And they'll try to clear the doubts if at all you have any. I'm sure you would if you are taking it up and you haven't heard or read too much about the course. So please do make use of these facilities. Of course, it goes without saying that this is the CSEET crash course which we are conducting for the upcoming May exams. As the name itself says, it is a crash course. We can't cover everything, of course, here. What we'll do is we'll try to give a general overview of the syllabus, at what exactly is there, and I'll try to cover the major topics briefly. If at all you want to know, or rather would like to watch and listen to the videos for all the 4 subjects of CSEET chapter wise, then I would suggest please do visit the link once again, the same link, that is excelacademy.com, which you can find it in the description, and register there for CSEET course. So all you have to do is just use your Gmail ID and you'll be able to register there free of cost. So once you do this, you will be able to see the chapter wise lessons for each of the topics in all the 4 subjects. So that is something which you can make use of, again free of cost. So let's come back to the lessons. Yesterday we had stopped here, that is factors affecting price elasticity of demand. So let's continue from here. So we already looked into the syllabus overview of economics and business environment. So we already looked into the elasticity as well. Elasticity, if I have to quickly recall, is nothing but the responsiveness. Okay, so that is what we looked into, and we also looked into different types of price elasticity. That means how the demand responds to the change in the price. So if there is small change in the price, how will it affect in different types of elasticity? So we have looked at perfectly inelastic, then perfectly elastic, relatively elastic, and finally unitary elastic, of course relatively inelastic as well. These are very simple topics, or rather simple concepts. So all you have to do is just read a couple of times and you should be able to grasp what exactly they are trying to say. Of course, since this is CSEET, nothing much is there in detail. That is, you don't have to have expert knowledge of whatever is there in the syllabus. As long as you understand the basics, that would be sufficient. I would suggest, if at all you have not read the material, that is the reference material which is released by the institute, give it a reading, especially for economics. It is easy for you to cover it within a day or two. Okay, and since you still have some time for the exams, at least some 25 days are left, you can still finish at least one reading of each of those subjects. Anyway, now let us look at the factors affecting the price elasticity of demand. So which are those factors? The first factor which they mention is the price level. Of course, that is the major thing here. The demand is generally elastic for moderately priced goods, they say. Generally elastic means as and when the price changes, the demand will also change. That is what they mean by generally elastic. That means it responds. For moderately priced goods, neither too high nor too low. If that is the case, then demand is usually elastic. It responds definitely to change in price. But the demand for very cheap and very costly goods is inelastic, they say, because there is a specific target here. If it is very costly, there are only some set of people who will be able to afford it. First of all, forget about the what is it, actual capacity. If that is the case, then they won't really it won't really matter to them if the price has increased or not. For example, let's say someone has income upwards of 10 crores, and for them it doesn't really matter if the price of the what is that Mini Cooper, let's say, has increased from 50 lakhs to 51 lakhs. 1 lakh is a significant increase in the price of a good, but someone whose annual income is more than 10 crore, they won't really bother about the price of that car, very expensive car, increasing from 50 to 51 lakhs. So they would say, well, okay, let's go and buy it. They wouldn't even really bother about the price. So it's a very expensive item. There, the elasticity is not there. That's why they say it is inelastic. And also for very cheap goods, they say. So inexpensive goods which are a necessity, for instance, salt, which is usually the best example in these type of concepts. Just because the price of the salt is reduced, we don't go and buy too much of salt. We'll buy as much as it is required, no? So it doesn't really matter to us. So it is also inelastic. That means the demand for such products will not respond to the change in price. That is what we need to understand. Next, availability of substitutes, if at all, whichever items price has come down or gone up has substitutes, then it will be slightly different. Let's see what exactly they say. If a good has close substitutes, that means it can be easily replaced with something else. The price elasticity of demand for a commodity will be very elastic, as some other commodities can be used for it. That means even if the price slightly increases for a commodity A, and when people know that there is commodity B which can easily replace commodity A, all of a sudden drastically the demand for A will come down, because we will immediately switch over to product B. Until now we were purchasing product A, but now that the price of the product has increased, we'll immediately switch to product B. So that way the demand for A drastically reduces. Why? Because there is a substitute. If there is no substitute, of course it won't happen. There will be elasticity, some amount of elasticity, but not to this extent. Then they say necessities. I already given the example of salt. You can also consider water here. Doesn't really matter what is the price. We generally have to have certain things in our life. So one of those being water. So it is generally not elastic. It is normally or usually inelastic in nature. Time period. So what do they say? Over a period of time, a good tends to become more elastic because consumers and businesses have more time to find alternatives or substitutes. That means if something has come to the market for the first time, maybe then you may not find substitute immediately. But over a period of time, there will be competition. People will see what exactly has come to the market, and other producers will also try to get the same type of products, if not the exact same product, to the market. Once substitutes are available, then the demand will be elastic, or at least it will become more and more elastic, because if the price of the product increases and if there is a substitute, we have already seen what happens. So time also plays a role here. Habits. Again, we'll have to get back to these examples, because we are already used to something, or maybe let's say some individual, let's say Mr. A is someone who will anyway consume one pack of cigarette. Someone who is used to consuming one pack of cigarette will definitely consume that whether or not the price has come down or gone up. Or someone who has to travel every day, or someone who is in the habit of traveling at least let's say 50 kilometers every day, doesn't really matter to him whether the price of the petrol or diesel or whatever it is has increased or decreased. So that is what we have to keep in mind. So habits will also come into play. Nature of commodities. Let's see what do they say about this. The demand for necessities is inelastic, and that for comforts and luxuries is elastic. Okay, the demand for necessities is inelastic. That means it doesn't correspond. And that for comforts and luxuries is elastic, they say. Okay. Luxury means, let's say, you can consider necessity, salt water as a necessity, food, shelter also as a necessity. But if at all someone was trying to or intending to buy, let's say, a costly mobile phone, very expensive mobile phone. Now all of a sudden the government increases the GST rate. From 18%, let's assume for a second that it increases the GST rate to 36%. That means almost, double the amount of GST which you will be required to pay on that particular phone. Now, is this a necessity? Obviously not. It's a luxury. So if that is the case, then demand for such products will become elastic. Okay. So that is what they say when it comes to nature of commodities. Various uses. Okay. A commodity which has several uses will have an elastic demand, such as milk, wood, etc. Okay. Because milk as such, as we already know, is not used for only one thing. We can make several different products out of milk. So therefore, in such a case, the demand will be elastic, they say. On the other hand, a commodity having only one or fewer uses will have inelastic demand. Okay. What they're trying to say is, it is easier for the customer to adjust for the quantity demanded of a good when it is used for satisfying several wants than if it is confined to a single or few uses. That means, let's say, I use milk for making ghee, then butter and something else, etc. When that is the case, when I'm using it for multiple things, then it is easier for the customer apparently to adjust the quantity demanded with the increase or decrease in the price. But if a particular commodity is used for only one thing, then they say in such a circumstance we usually don't adjust. So therefore in such circumstances the elasticity will be inelastic. I'm not sure if this point works, but it's given. I would suggest just ponder over this particular point, that is point 7, not very convincing according to me. Then postponing consumption. Usually the demand for commodities, the consumption of which can be postponed, is elastic. Why? Because if you can postpone, that means you have a choice of not consuming it. If you did not have a choice, you would obviously not postpone it. If you are postponing, that means you can always consume that product at a later point of time, or maybe if you do not wish to, you need not at all. So in such a circumstance, the price will be elastic, because if the price has increased, I can always say we'll buy it next year, next month, whatever it is. So that is the thing. So that's about the factors affecting the supply, elasticity of what is it? Demand. Next, income elasticity of demand. Okay, let's see what exactly this is. We looked at price elasticity. Now we are looking at income elasticity. Income elasticity of demand is the degree of responsiveness. Once again, it is nothing but the responsiveness of demand to the change in income. So earlier it was change in price of a particular commodity. Here it is change in the income of the consumer. Earlier someone had income of let's say 3 lakhs per annum. Now they have 10 lakhs per annum. Now when there is change in the income, how would they respond to such a change in the income? Will they demand more? Will the demand be less or same or whatever it is? Okay, let's see. So one Mr. Professor Watson defines it as income elasticity of demand is the rate of change of quantity demanded with respect to the changes in the income. As I said, Earlier it was 3 lakhs, now it has increased to 10 lakhs. So how are they going to respond with respect to the demand of products? Other determinants remaining constant. As we have already seen, anything in economics is usually qualified with certain conditions. Without those, we cannot make sweeping statements. We'll always assume certain things, that these are there. With that situation on hand, we can say this is what will happen. The income elasticity of demand can be measured by the following formula. They have given the formula as well. We have already seen formula for price elasticity. So they say delta Q by Q multiplied by delta Y by Y. So wherein they say Y is the income and Q is the quantity demanded. So you can look into the formula, which is similar to the price elasticity. Okay. Again, there are types of income elasticity very similar to the elasticity of price. We have negative demand for a commodity. Negative demand means as the income increases, you tend to not purchase certain things. Let's say, since your income was only 3 lakhs, you were buying some particular food item. Let's say something very inexpensive. What can I think of that? Let's say a poor quality of rice, let's assume for a second. Okay. So which cost you very little. And you didn't have any other go, because you had to make sure that within the 3 lakh rupees, you had to fulfill all your needs. But now that it has increased to 10 lakhs, you can do away with this particular type of rice and maybe go for, let's say, some type of basmati rice, just to give an example. So that means you are foregoing one particular product for something else because your income has increased. So then there are other goods wherein there won't be any changes in demand. If it's a necessity, that is, if it is essential goods, how does it matter to us whether our income is 10 crores or 10 lakhs? We will obviously buy such goods. So that is what they say. So then there is those type of goods for in the elasticity will be greater than 0 but less than 1. So here what happens is, it corresponds to the change in the level of income. Like if your income has increased by some extent, the demand for certain products will also increase by certain extent. That is what they say. And unitary elastic or unity, wherein they say, if your income increases by, let's say, 10 lakh, and the demand will also increase by 10 lakhs. So it is in the same proportion as the rise in income. Whatever is the percentage of rise in income, the percentage of rise in demand will also be the same. Then there is greater than unity. That means the demand for the commodity will be far more, or rather it will increase to a far more extent compared to the increase in income. If my income increases by 10%, the demand might increase by 20%. So that would be greater than unity. Okay, let's look at certain other things as well with respect to elasticity. We have this concept called cross elasticity of demand. Okay, let's see what exactly this is. The responsiveness of demand to changes in, okay, before we proceed further, this is it's small announcement. If at all you have any doubts at any point of time, you can always drop a comment below on the chat window. So I will definitely get back to you. If not during the live session, of course, if you are attending the live session, you can always ping me using the chat window. But if at all you are watching the recorded session later on, so no issues, you can still drop a comment below. I will respond. Anyway, let's move on. Okay. What do they say? The responsiveness of demand to changes in prices of related commodities is called cross elasticity. Okay. Here they are talking about the related commodities. So once again, Professor Watson, let's see what exactly he says about cross elasticity. Cross elasticity of demand is the rate of change in quantity associated with a change in the price of related goods. Okay, that means let's say A and B are related goods. If the price of A changes, if it is increasing or decreasing, how, to what extent the quantity demanded of B will increase or decrease. So this is what we mean by cross elasticity of demand. Percentage increase in quantity demanded of A for percentage increase in price of B, or vice versa, wherein we can also say percentage increase, or that's what, percentage increase in price of A corresponding to percentage increase in the quantity demanded of B. So that usually happens, we've already seen with substitutes as well. Yeah, that's what they say. The relationship between X and Y commodities may be substitutive in case of tea and coffee. That means if the price of tea increases, maybe then people might switch over to coffee because they may consider coffee as a substitute. So that is something which we have already seen. And they have other types of cross elasticity as well. It depends to what extent a particular good can substitute another. Okay, cross elasticity infinity, that means it is infinite, it is very elastic. Commodity X is nearly a perfect substitute for commodity Y. That means if you have two commodities X and Y and the price of one increases, the elasticity of the other will be infinite because it is perfectly or a near perfect substitute. Then we have cross elasticity 0. That means it is not at all elastic. If the price of X changes, then the quantity demanded of Y will not change at all and it will remain the same. Why so? Because they are not at all related. If they are not related, then there is no cross elasticity at all. Then we have negative. So what is this negative? Complementary. That means if the price of one item changes, the demand for other actually corresponds to it. That means if the price of vehicle or rather petrol increases, the demand for vehicles will come down. Why? Because there is a negative elasticity, because the nature of the goods are that of complementary. It's not substitute, of course. So because one is related to another, so it is happening so. Okay, now let's move on to the next concept, that is increase in demand and decrease in demand. So this is interesting because there are two types of such changes in demand. One would be contraction, expansion. The other would be increase, decrease. Let us first look at increase, decrease, and then we'll move to expansion and contraction. Changes in demand include an increase or decrease in demand. Of course, yes. That's why we say changes in demand. Due to the change in the price of related goods, the income of consumers, the preferences of consumers, etc., the demand for a product or service will change. Okay. So here, if you observe carefully, we are not looking at the price of the commodity itself, but instead change in the price of related goods or change in the income of consumers or maybe preferences of consumers, the demand for a product or service will change. Okay. Increase in demand. When demand changes, not because of price, we are not considering price at all, but because of other stuff, because of changes in other determinants of demand, it is a case of either increase or decrease in demand. So you can see the shift of the demand curve here. Why is it shifting? Because of other reasons, not because of increase in price. So increase in demand means more demand at same price. The price has not changed. The price remains the same, but the quantity demanded has changed. You can notice the price remains the same, but the quantity demanded, there is a shift towards right. Why? Maybe because the substitute which was available all of a sudden is not available. So therefore, even at the same price, people are buying more and more of commodity, let's say X. So I'm just giving you one example. So there are many such factors which determine increase or decrease in demand, which has got nothing to do with the price of the commodity itself. Okay. Again, it can also come down also if because of other determinants, not because of the price. Now let us look at the other concept, which is expansion and contraction of demand. Okay, let's see what exactly they have to say about this. This is mostly price related. Not mostly, it is completely price related. When quantity demanded of a commodity increases as a result of the fall in the price, it is called extension or expansion. Better to use the word expansion, mostly used in demand. And when the quantity demanded decreases as a result of increase in the price, it is called the contraction of demand. So as you can notice here, the price is not remaining the same as it was in the previous example, but it is changing. The price, let's say this is the demand curve. The increase in price leads to decrease in demand. Reduction in price leads to increase in demand. See, if you can notice here, the price has come down to, let's say, P5, and the demand has gone up to, let's say, D3. So that is something which we see when it comes to expansion and contraction. So then last topic of chapter 1, that is forms of market competition. So let's see what are the different types of markets which we have. First is, of course, the perfect competition. As the name itself says, even though it is considered perfect, there is no such perfect competition in reality, because it's an utopian concept. We can't have perfect competition at all. It is only an ideal which we can try to strive, but I'm sure we won't be able to succeed. So that doesn't mean that we should not try, but this is what it is. Let's see what exactly they mean by perfect competition. So they say in perfect competition market structure, there are large number of buyers and sellers. So the sellers as well as buyers will be large in number. Okay. It is not restricted to one entity, couple of entities, or handful of entities, but instead to large number of buyers. When there are large number of buyers and sellers, none of the parties are in a dominant position. If one of the parties is in a dominant position, then we cannot say that this is a perfect competition. Okay. All the sellers of the market are small sellers in competition with each other. So that means there is no such big seller who can actually influence the market, but instead the market is filled with small sellers. Okay. The products on the market are homogeneous. That means they're almost the same, completely identical. One looks like another. All the firms have only motive of profit maximization. Okay. So that is an assumption. There is free entry and exit from the market. There are no barriers. That means, let's say you want to sell your wares in some supermarket, let's say Big Bazaar. Can you simply go there and sell your stuff just like that? Of course not, because there are barriers. When it comes to selling there are exit barriers, there are entry barriers. So therefore we cannot consider that as perfect competition. And there is no concept of consumer preference. That means consumer sees everything as one and the same. He doesn't prefer good item of shop A over item of shop B. When that is the case, we say perfect competition exists when all these conditions are satisfied. As you may have already guessed or understood by now, there is no way we can satisfy all these conditions, because these are not realistic conditions or situations. So therefore there is no way we can have perfect competition in reality. Next, monopolistic competition. Not monopoly, but monopolistic. This is a more realistic scenario that actually occurs in real world. They say more realistic. Okay. In monopolistic competition, there are still a large number of buyers as well as sellers. Here also they say there are a large number, but they do not sell homogeneous products. That means you can clearly distinguish between the product which is sold by, let's say, seller A and product which is sold by seller B. When that is the case, we say definitely there is no perfect competition, but it is a characteristic of monopolistic. We'll read further what other things are there. The products are similar, but all sellers sell slightly differentiated products. Imagine there is a food street somewhere and all of them are preparing dosa. All of them are still preparing dosa, but the dosa of shop A will be slightly or maybe totally different from dosa of shop B. So in such a circumstance, we can say that they are not selling identical but slightly different products. Now the consumers have preference of choosing one product over another. That means I may not like those of those shop A, but I may like those of shop B, and someone else might actually like those of shop A and not of shop B. This preference of consumer did not exist in perfect competition. We didn't really care from which shop a particular commodity was being bought, because everything was homogeneous, whereas here it is not the case. Okay. Oligopoly. So here they say there are only few firms in the market. Okay. There is no clarity about the number of firms. We do not know how much would be considered as few. Is it 10, 15, 1, 2, etc.? So they are giving a rough figure wherein they say 3 to 5 dominant firms are considered the norm. So if there is an industry with, let's say, 3 to 5 producers or suppliers of some service, in such a circumstance we can say it is oligopoly. In the case of oligopoly, the buyers will always outweigh the sellers. If there are only 3 to 5 sellers, obviously the buyers would be more in number. For example, let's say COVID vaccine. In case of COVID vaccine, actually we have only two there. It will come under duopoly. But let's assume there are three particular companies, A, B, C. Then it would be, oligopoly. Okay. The firms in this case either compete with another or collaborate together. That means either I will compete directly with B, or maybe I can collaborate as well. Because if we collaborate, who else is left? Only C is left. Maybe we can kick them out of the competition. They use their market influence to set the prices and in turn maximize their profits. Since we have only 3 players in the market and we do not have anyone else to go to, obviously we'll have to buy from them only. So obviously in such a circumstance they will have more influence over the market. So here the consumers become price takers. We can't decide the price. We cannot say if you increase the price, we will not buy from you. We can't say, because we have only 3 options. Whom else will we go to? For example, if you look at the mobile situation in India, there is the operator service. We have Airtel, then we have then we have Jio. Major players. I'm not considering all the minor players like BSNL, etc. When that is the case, either you go to Airtel, that is Vodafone India, and then Jio. If none of them satisfy you, then what choice do you have? You will ultimately become price taker, not price decider. Okay. So that is the thing. Monopoly is very simple. Only one seller will be there, or a major seller who just dominates the entire market. Not possible in real life, because there will be some sort of competition at some point of time. Once people realize that this person is making enough money by selling or producing a product A or service A, so the moment people notice that, other businesses will also pitch in and try to earn their share of profits. So monopoly largely does not exist. Then we have duopoly, slightly better than monopoly, but wherein they say only 2 players are there. For example, Bharat Biotech and what is the other name? Serum Institute. So only 2 institutes or companies in India who are manufacturing COVID vaccines. So now, do we have any choice apart from these 2 in India, that is made in India? Obviously not. We'll have to import and then use those vaccinations. Anyway, so that is about duopoly, or rather different types of market. What we'll do is we'll take a break of couple of minutes and then we will resume. excuse me. Let's look at elasticity of supply. Very similar concept to that of elasticity of demand. In elasticity of demand, what we did was we looked at the responsiveness of demand to the change in price and to the change in income. So likewise, we are looking at elasticity of supply as to how the the supplier will respond, how the supplier will respond to the change in the price. If the price of the commodity increases, will he supply more? If the price of the commodity decreases, will he supply less? So how will he react to the change in the price of the commodity? So that is what we see in elasticity of supply, because he is the one who will supply the goods ultimately. So okay, let's see what exactly the material has to say. The elasticity of supply establishes a quantitative relationship between the supply of a commodity and its price. Okay. We can express the numeral change in supply with the change in the price of a commodity using concept of elasticity. Okay, basically what they're trying to say is the same thing can be applied here also. We can look at the formula also. It is very similar, wherein they say delta Q, that is change in the quantity by the original quantity into 100. So that will give us the change or the percentage of change in terms of quantity, that divided by delta P, that is a change in the price by the original price multiplied by 100. So if they have to simplify this formula, what they have done is just cross multiply. So it will be delta Q by Q divided by delta P by P. So this is the formula. So with this formula, we can easily measure the responsiveness of the producer to the change in the price of the commodity. So now let's see the different types of price elasticity. Again, it's once again the same thing. We have perfectly inelastic, perfectly elastic, unitary, etc., etc. So I won't get into that because it's very similar to what we have already seen. Only thing here is, there we were looking at the demand. That means how exactly a consumer will respond to change in demand. Is it perfectly elastic? Is he responding according to the change in price, or is he perfectly inelastic? Is he not at all responding? Here also the same thing will happen. Sometimes the producer is not worried whether the price has increased or decreased. He has to produce. He will produce. So in such a circumstance, you can't do much. Imagine someone, a farmer who has already harvested lemon. Right now the price of lemon is too high, but all of a sudden if it comes down, do you think he will not actually produce lemon? Obviously he can't do anything. He will have to produce irrespective of the price at the time of his harvest. So that is something over which he will not have any control. So likewise, there are different types of elasticity. You can just have a look at it. If you have already understood the price elasticity and the income elasticity, supply elasticity is not that difficult for you to understand. So again, let us look at this actually, factors influencing the elasticity of supply. So how or why would a particular producer actually respond to the change in the price? Price of the good, obviously the most important factor. The supply and elasticity of supply of a good depends upon the price of the good. If the price of the good increases or decreases, the quantity supplied of it will also increase. Price increases, supply will also increase. Or if price decreases, supply will decrease. This is the law of supply we already seen. Also, the coefficient of price elasticity of supply will depend on the price of the good. That means what they're trying to say is ES, that is price elasticity, will be greater than, less than, or equal to 1 depending on the price. We've already seen that. As you already may be aware, this is exactly what they are talking about. How much, to what extent the price will affect the supply. As I said, no need to repeat this again. We already know that. Probability that price would change in future. This is interesting. If the seller thinks that the price of the good will increase or decrease in the near future, then at present he will not respond to the increase or decrease in the price. That means, let's say the price of one particular commodity which is in short supply, maybe let's think of lemon only. Someone has 100 kgs of lemon with him. So what he does is, as soon as the price increases from, let's say how much is that, 80 rupees per kg to 150 rupees per kg, even though he has 100 kgs of lemon, he is not supplying more to the market. He's still hoarding those. Why do you think he would do that? Because he is expecting that the price of this particular vegetable will actually increase further. Maybe it will increase to 250 or 300, then I will supply. So that is the expectation, that is the probability. Conditions regarding cost of production. Sometimes what will happen is the price of the commodity increases. I, as a supplier, want to supply more to the market, but I am hindered by the cost of production. Meaning, if I produce more, my raw materials will cost me more. My supplier will also charge me more. So, if that is the case, it doesn't make sense to me to produce more and pay the others rather than enjoy the profit. So, in such a circumstance, also the supplier will be like, okay, let the price of the commodity increase, but this is what I can supply, because more than this, my cost of production will definitely increase. Then they say nature of the good. Okay, if more the perishable or the lumpiness of the good, the more would it market localized, more would be its market localized, and in a localized market, the supply of good at any particular price would be relatively small. Okay, what they're trying to say is, if it's a local market and you are restricted only to the local market, let's say one particular area in a district or one district itself, you do not go beyond that. Now the price has increased, but for how many people will you supply? You already know that this is the existing market. People will not buy more just because you are supplying, no? So if that is the case, that is, if the market is strictly local, then also the supplier may not actually respond. He may sometimes, if it is a big market. If it is small market, he won't. Length of time. If the price of the good rises, then by how much would supply rise, or how large will be the price elasticity of supply would depend on the length of the time available for necessary adjustments. Meaning, if you have to take farming example itself, let's say there is a huge demand for tomato all of a sudden. Now, can I, as a farmer, grow tomatoes instantly and supply to the market just because the price is more? Obviously, I won't be able to do, because the length of the time required for this is not so short. So depending on that also, the supplier will have to, make adjustments. Okay, so that was about chapter 1. So we are done with chapter 1. Let's move on to chapter 2, which is national income, accounting and related concepts. So we looked at law of demand, law of supply, price elasticity of demand, price elasticity of supply, income elasticity of demand in the previous chapter. Now we'll be looking at national income, like gross domestic product, gross national product, net national product, stuff like this. So in this chapter, so it's very easy, not very difficult to understand. All that you have to understand is the broad concepts here. If you are able to understand the broad concepts, then details can be easily inferred. Anyway, let's see what exactly the institute has to say. National income is an uncertain term which is used interchangeably with national dividend. Okay, let me just check the chat window if at all there is any. Okay, fine, then we'll continue. Okay, what else do they say? National income means the total value of goods and services produced annually in a country. Okay, this is very simple and straightforward definition. What do they say? National income means what? Total value of the goods. Okay, which goods? Goods which are produced and services which are rendered annually in a country. That means in an year, what is the total value of the goods which you produce, and what is the total value of the services which you render? So if you take both together, then what will we get? We'll get the national income. Okay, then national income or net national income is nothing but gross national income or gross national product, but minus the depreciation. So now in the exam they may ask this formula also, who knows. So what is national income? It is gross national income. National income is nothing but GNI, which stands for gross national income, minus the depreciation. That is what it is. Likewise, net national income. What is net national income? That is nothing but gross national product, GNP, minus depreciation. In both the cases, we are ignoring depreciation. That way we'll get the net income and net national income. Next, methods to measure national income. Okay, let's see which are the methods they prefer. First is the product method, then we have income method, expenditure method. Okay, three different methods. So let's see which of these makes sense, or if at all none of those make sense, then it doesn't rest. Now, first one, the product method. The product method measures the contribution of each producing enterprise in domestic territory of the country. That means whatever the seller, or rather not seller, the manufacturer is manufacturing, and whatever is being traded, everything is considered as a contribution. Okay, contribution of each producing enterprise in the domestic territory of the country. Wherever there's a producing enterprise, whatever they produce will be considered for calculating GDP or national income using the product method. Then, so what are the steps then? Identify the producing enterprises. First of all, look at all the enterprises. Let's say there are 100 different enterprises. Out of those 100, let's say 50 are producing enterprises. Then what will we do? We'll classify them according to the sectors. Once we do this, then what will we do? We'll estimate the net value added by each enterprise. Let's say there is enterprise A, B, C, D. What is the value which they added in one single year? How do we do that? Once we do that, what will we do? We'll add the values of all the other companies of that sector. Let's say we have grouped company A in sector 1. We'll also look at the other companies in sector 1 and finally total them. Then sector 1's income will be seen, and if you combine all sectors, you'll get the national income. That is what it is. The product approach measures national incomes involves adding up the value of all the final products. That's all. So whatever final product has been made, we will simply add it. We will not consider the work in progress, because then it might lead to double counting. So that's why we are only looking at the final products. So that is also value added actually. If there is something which is still in progress, we won't consider it at all. That's a disadvantage, but again, it makes sense also sometimes to not consider something which has not been finished at all. So how do we even know whether that particular product will add to the GDP? Okay, next. The product approach measures national income involves adding the value. Okay, we have already seen that. Here we focus on various sectors of economy and add up all their production during the year. The main sector whose production value is added up. Okay, here they're giving us an example as to which are the different sectors which they have come up with. They have agricultural sector, manufacturing, construction, transport, communication, banking, administration, defense, and distribution of income. All these are different sectors whose sector-wise national income will be added, and then we'll calculate the national income. So that is about it. There are different problems of product method. Let's see quickly what exactly is the problem. Problem of double counting. Okay, sometimes we add up particular value because it might be in various sectors. Maybe one particular factory is in sector 1 as well as in sector 2. If that is the case, then how do we even differentiate between sector 1 and sector 2? Or rather, instead of differentiating, I can put it this way: how do we know this has already not been considered? It's very difficult. So that is obviously a disadvantage. Then while calculating national income, the values of goods added in the particular year in question are added up. Okay, particular year, yeah, that is very important here. So of that year only, not of the previous year. Okay, and not of the future projections. The values which had previously been added to the stock of raw materials and goods have to be ignored. If you have already added something to the value of goods or something to the value of services in the previous year itself, then no need to add it again. So now what is this GDP? So they are defining what GDP is here itself. GDP thus includes only those goods and services that are newly produced. This is very important. So we cannot consider goods which are already produced as part of the GDP. Only those goods which are newly produced when in the previous 1 year. Stock appreciation, if any. Stock appreciation means you have some closing stock. Let's say you had valued at 45,000 6 months ago and you haven't touched it at all. because maybe you are shifting to different line of production, or maybe you want to shift to different product line. Now for some reason you want to manufacture this or sell this, let's assume. When you are about to sell, the value of this stock has actually increased. It was 45 6 months ago. After 6 months it has become 55 for some reason, because maybe the material is not available or something. So then it is stock appreciation. Then production for self consumption. So if it is production for self consumption, then also you will consider that for GDP, because you are still producing some good, right? If you are not producing any good, how will you even consume it? So if you are producing some good but for self consumption, attach some value to it, maybe consider the market value itself. So when you do that, you will be able to calculate the GDP. Expenditure method. Expenditure method approach measures national income as total spending. So in the previous one we are looking at national income, but in case of expenditure method they are looking at the total spending on final goods and services. Like how much are people spending on a particular good, how much are people spending on a particular service. So that is what they will add up and then try to calculate the GDP. So here there are various topics, which is consumption. Okay, let's look at consumption. Consumption expenditure is the largest component of national income. It includes expenditure on all goods and services produced and sold to the final consumer during the year. Meaning basically you consume goods, I consume goods, right? So now that would be considered as consumption. So whatever we have consumed, it need not be only, when I say consumption, it is not just about eating it. No, obviously not. It's about using, to what extent we are using it. So that is what they mean when they say consumption. So then we have investment expenditure. So investment is the use of, they say is the use of today's resources and expand tomorrow's production or consumers. Basically, let's say there is some big shot who has too much money, he doesn't know what to do with it. So what will he do? He will invest in different companies. So now how will you decide to which company to invest in? So again, it's a whole different procedure, but what they're trying to say is investment expenditure is expenditure incurred on by business firms, or let's say new plants, adding stock of inventories, and newly constructed houses. So if you are investing in some company for any of these three reasons, then also we will consider that for GDP. Government expenditure. Government spends a lot, because imagine railways. Railways is owned by government, that is the central government. They spend so much on railways, so that is there. Then net exports. Net exports are defined as total exports minus total imports. So if we have more of imports and less of exports, then we'll have net exports. Okay, actually then you'll have net imports. We'll have to have reverse situation, wherein we can say there is too much of export and too little import, which is obviously not the case, but still we'll consider it. Now what do they say? National income calculated from the expenditure side is the sum of final consumption, that we have already seen. Expenditure income by business on any plants, government spending, and net exports. Okay, that's fine. Let's move on. Precautions for expenditure method, will not get into that. Next is income method. Income approach is another alternative way of computing national income. This method seeks to measure national income at the phase of distribution itself. This is interesting. First we looked at the production, then we looked at the expenditure. Now we are looking at the income method. So wherein they say the method seeks to measure national income at the phase of distribution. That means, let's say someone is working for SBI, State Bank of India. So now how do we measure their income, or who will tell us what exactly their contribution to GDP is, if at all you are using income method? So what do they say? It seeks to measure national income at the phase of distribution. That means even before I distribute my or rather the salary of my employees to them, I will try to calculate the total income which they are contributing, or the total income which they are earning, so that it will be easy for us to calculate GDP income wise. Next, Again, they talk about factors of production. The factors of production being income, wages, rents, interest, and profit paid for. Okay. Again, we have a graph here about gross domestic product. I won't get into that because it's nothing but repetition of already done stuff. So we had done the same thing earlier here. So now again, once again, they're asking us to do the same thing. Need not be. Okay. GDP at factor cost, they say, is the sum of the net value added by all producers within the country. Sum of net value added by all the producers, not any one or two. Okay. Okay. Sai Charan is live, I guess. He says good morning. Good morning, Sai. I hope you're following our classes, whether here, that is on YouTube, or on the website. Let's move on. Where were we? Yes. Yeah. GDP. Yes. GDP at factor cost. Now that is where we were. Let's see what exactly they have to say. Net value added by all the producers within the country. This is also important. Within the country. Since the net value added gets distributed as income, obviously, to the owners of factors of production, GDP is a sum of domestic factor incomes, and there is nothing but fixed capital consumption or depreciation. Okay, let's not worry about the statement. Let us look at the formula. It's far more easier to understand that way. So what are they saying? GDP at factor cost. Okay, so if GDP is considered at factor cost, what is the formula? Net value added, whatever is the value added by production of goods and services in the last 1 year, plus depreciation. Okay, is it? Okay, fine. So now what exactly is this? Actually, it is minus depreciation. Okay, we'll see. Compensation. Okay, GDP at factor cost includes compensation of employees, wages, etc. That means we are looking at incomes at the distribution phase itself. Operating surplus, which is the business profit or labor of both incorporated and unincorporated firms. Means they're considering both companies as well as entities like property concern, partnership, etc. So they have given a formula for operating surplus, which is actually better and easy to understand. Gross value added factor at cost minus compensation to the employees minus depreciation. When you do this, you will get the GDP. They say GDP at factor cost and GDP at market price must be identical, because the factor cost of producing goods must be equal to the final value of the goods and services it markets or produces. Okay. So we are here now. That is GDP at factor cost. I'll just quickly see how much of the chapter is left. So then we have GNP, different methods of GNP at market prices, mostly about GNP. Then NNP is nothing much. Then we have personal income, real income. Okay, that's all. Not much of the chapter is left. What I will do is I'll stop here and continue the rest of the chapter in the next economics class. So we'll have to start from GNP at factor cost, right? Or slightly earlier, sorry. Okay, we'll start from GDP deflator. So in the next class. Thank you for joining the live session. See you tomorrow, same time, 7:30. I think according to the timetable tomorrow we have legal aptitude. So let's look at legal aptitude tomorrow. Thank you.